Hi everyone, Kareen over here with Broken Ground, and I just finished planting my garlic. So we are having an extended fall here, which is kind of amazing. But I thought I would go over my top 5 lessons this season as I sit on this bench that I rarely sit on in my food forest. I was giving some thought to what I learned this season and thought I would just break it down into my top 5. So number 1 is that if you have voles, cover cropping doesn't work so well. So I cover cropped an area of my back main crop area, and it was coming up. It was like peas, oats, and vetch, and it was coming up beautifully. And then at a certain point, it looked really tasty for voles. And because that main crop area is connected to my food forest, which is where a lot of the voles are, they ended up kind of cutting down a lot of the pea shoots. So that approach didn't really work. So I think cover cropping as a way of soil building on my site, as long as I have voles, which will kind of be a perpetual thing, I think, because the food forest is habitat for them and because I can't get a cat. I don't think cover cropping is going to be an option for me. So instead I have to look at other soil building approaches. So that's probably bringing in compost, making compost myself, doing more vermicomposting, which is something that I plan on doing. And I'll be talking about that a little bit more in another video. So first off, sometimes cover cropping doesn't work. If you have a site where you have plenty of cats to deal with voles, or you don't have a vole issue, I think cover cropping is a really great option in terms of soil building, but not for me, or at least not this year. So that's my first lesson. My second lesson is that if you do have voles in this main crop area, they do not bother alliums. So they don't bother garlic, onions, leeks. So again, problem is the solution, as we like to say in permaculture, is that if you do have voles in the areas where you might have voles, if you put in, view that as an area where you're going to be growing a lot of your alliums. So back here, even though they ate a lot of the peas from the cover crop, they didn't touch the onions, they didn't touch the leeks, and I had a great leek and onion crop, and of course garlic crop this year. So that's my second lesson. My third takeaway is that I think I've reached a tipping point of having too much calendula and borage in my garden. So I love both of them, and they are both such great multifunctional plants. Calendula is medicinal, it attracts pollinators. Borage, same thing, it's edible, it attracts pollinators, has a huge amount of biomass, a lot of moisture in that biomass, great forage for chickens. So very wonderful plants to have, but I think I've reached this tipping point where too much is starting to volunteer everywhere, and it's hard to, in the annual garden, it's hard to kind of keep on top of it before it starts to outcompete some of the crops that I'm actually growing. So that's my third lesson, that I think next year I will be a little bit more vigilant and knock it back a little bit. I mean, the one thing that you got to think about is that it's serving a function, but again, getting back to your goals, if you're trying to kind of grow as much food as possible, the calendula might be getting in the way, even though I love creating pollinator habitat. So that's my third lesson. My fourth lesson is that you are able to redo things after 10 years. In some of my classes, I often talk about the Yeoman's keyline scale of permanence. And basically the idea there is that there are things that are very more permanent on your landscape that are much harder to change. So that's climate, for example, even though our climate is changing, but in general, right, you're connected to a USDA hardiness zone that you can't do very much about. You are connected to a growing season that you have to abide by, right? So you can't really change climate, hard to change slope, right? And then as you go along the scale of permanence, things like fencing is easier to change. Things like your soil is easy to change, and things like vegetation are easy to change. And so this year I had a lot of grass coming into one of my berms in the food forest, and we did a whole redo with my lovely intern cat. We scraped all of that grass away and replanted a bunch of plants. I put in more natives in that area, and this was the first year, and things grew really well, and we'll see. I'm really excited about next year to see what kind of pops up now that it's not competing as much with grass. So don't be afraid to do a renovation, right? Just like after a while, maybe your house might need some renovation or something like that. Same with a food forest. There might be areas that you redo or that you renovate in some way. So that's my fourth lesson. And then my fifth lesson is to pay more attention to the soil in my greenhouse. So because the soil in the greenhouse is not connected to the rest of the garden, it's not connected to the rain and the elements, you have to pay a little bit more attention to it. And this year, early season, it's always been a great place to grow out my seedlings and to have early season greens. But this year you could tell with my hot crops that I put in there that they didn't grow as abundantly. They weren't really thriving in there. And it seems like I do have I have spider mites, which is really a common thing that you can get in your greenhouse. But I also have some sort of fungal thing going on. I haven't had it tested yet at the lab, but I know enough to know that it's not ideal. So it's having it's wilting some of my tomato plants, and so I need to pay more attention to that. And because the greenhouse again doesn't have that balance of being out in an environment where you can rely more on natural systems to do stuff, and you have to participate more, paying more attention to your greenhouse soil is critical. So in another video, I'm gonna tell you what I'm doing to do a little bit of a renovation there, which is going to involve vermicomposting. So I'm kind of excited about the approach that I'm going to take next year. But those are my top 5 takeaways. I have many more. The garden is always a teacher. Let me know what you learned this year in your garden, and thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Okay, bye.